The OnePlus 7T launched 26 September last year, only 4 months after the release of the OnePlus 7 Pro. As expected from a T model, the OnePlus 7T did not appear to do anything unique in terms of design or features, just a good old minor update for the year. Now, to be honest, the OnePlus 7T was a bit of an odd one, because since the release of the OnePlus 7 Pro, we basically knew that a 7T Pro was just on the horizon, not even mentioning the OnePlus 8, but we'll get to that later. So on the front of the phone, we've got a 6.55 inches AMOLED display that gets as bright as 1000 nits. This time around, the display has an aspect ratio of 20:9, which not only makes it feel taller, but also makes reaching some parts of the screen with your thumb easier. The most noticeable thing, however, is the 90Hz refresh rate, which makes the overall user experience very fluid and responsive. In addition, the bezels have been pushed further back, only contributing to that experience. So on the inside of the phone, we have got a 7nm octa-core Snapdragon 855 processor with 8 gigs of RAM with an internal storage of 128 or 256 gigs. The battery is decent as well. It's a 3800 mAh battery that also supports 30 watts of warp charging. So on the GPU side of things, we have got an Adreno 650, which means that games like Elder Scrolls Blades, Asphalt 8 or games of similar graphical fidelity run fairly smoothly on the OnePlus 7T, running more or less at a stable 30 frames per second. So while I was recording some gameplay footage on this phone, I quickly realized that the phone does have a tendency to heat up during high performance or even while warp charging. Now this is something to be expected, and it's a minor complaint from my end as well, but then for people who game a lot on their phones and don't put a case on, the phone does get pretty uncomfortable to hold at times, and this is something to consider. Moving on, let's talk about the speakers on board. Carried over from the OnePlus 7 Pro are the front-firing stereo speakers, which are a significant improvement over the single-firing units we have had before, that were mediocre at best. These speakers also support Dolby Atmos, which do a great job at creating that surround sound effect and providing an immersive experience simply through sound. Now, something worth mentioning is the haptic feedback you get out of this phone, and honestly, it was one of the first things I noticed when I picked it up. There's really no way of describing it, but the haptic feedback does make the phone a bit more flagship. Finally, let's talk about the cameras. This time around, we have got a triple lens camera setup at the back, and to be honest, I'm not a big fan of the circular camera design because it simply looks too chunky in my opinion. And this is where I think the OnePlus 7T Pro comes into play, where it's a decision purely made to differentiate both the models from each other. Anyway, in the middle, we have got our 26mm f1.6 wide-angle main lens that also supports OIS. On the right, we have our 51mm f2.2 telephoto lens. On the left, we have got our 17mm f2.2 ultra wide-angle lens, and on the front, we have got our 16-megapixel sensor with a lens of aperture f2.0. So now that the numbers are out of the way, let's see how the camera actually performs. So this photo has been shot using the wide-angle lens with a good amount of light coming from the window. It's not the sharpest image in the world, but it is sharp enough to see the finer details on the leaf, so overall the results are as expected. Now this one comes from the telephoto lens at 2x zoom, and here there is clearly some softening being done, but then again it is being balanced by the optical zoom. Now the image is softer than the wide angle lens, but it is still nothing unexpected. Now this one comes out of the ultra wide angle lens, and it is the softest image out of the three, and as a result of that, the patterns on the leaf are not exactly prominent or sharp. Now I would like to remind you that I'm really nitpicking these photos, and under proper lighting conditions, the photos you get out of this phone are mostly indistinguishable from other flagships out there. What I'm not the biggest fan of, however, is the image processing, where images are usually oversaturated and shadows are a bit crunched, giving it that vibrant grainy look. However, looking at the price point of this phone, I have to say, it's one of the best cameras you will find on a mid-range smartphone. So, what does the phone get right? I think the OnePlus 7T, despite it being priced at 38,000 rupees, or roughly, or 500 USD, the phone does feel like a complete package. The phone both looks and functions like a flagship. Most phones in this price range tend to cut corners in several areas like build quality or the software experience, but the OnePlus 70 simply doesn't do that. The build quality on the OnePlus 70 is really good, and Oxygen OS as well is a breeze to use, and it's one of the selling points of OnePlus anyway, so a good software experience is always a cherry on top. I think it's the little things that makes the OnePlus 7T so easy to recommend to anyone. The haptic feedback, or the 90Hz refresh rate, or even the fingerprint scanner. One of the biggest criticisms I had with the OnePlus 6T, of which I clearly made a review very recently, was the fingerprint scanner, which was a bit slow and inconsistent. The OnePlus 7T directly fixes that issue because this fingerprint scanner on this one is not only faster, but it's more consistent. Sure, there are a couple of hiccups here and there, but for the most part, the fingerprint scanner is very consistent. So, if you already own a OnePlus 7T, should you upgrade? So let's compare it to all the phones that came after it. The OnePlus 7T Pro is the least deserving one because not only you just bought the OnePlus 7T, but also the differences between the 7T and 7T Pro are minuscule, and the 7T Pro is quite clearly a cash grab from OnePlus. The OnePlus 8 and 8 Pro, as good as they are, I think it's still not worth getting an upgrade if you already have a 7T. You should get them if they are going to be your first OnePlus devices right now. But if you already own a OnePlus 7T, do not go for the OnePlus 8 or 8 Pro yet. The OnePlus Nord is going to come out in a couple of days, and to be honest, as promising as that looks, I think it is still going to cut some corners to keep the prices down. And if you already have a 7T, I see no reason to switch to a OnePlus Nord whenever it comes out. So that leaves us with the OnePlus 8T. Now we haven't heard anything about it yet, but I think if you already own a OnePlus 7T and are planning to upgrade already, I think you should wait for the OnePlus 8T at the very least. Alright guys, so that was it for the video. Hopefully you guys liked this video. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you want to, and yeah, that has been it for the video. Thanks for watching.